Cynthia's got our whole IT team.
Hello, everyone. I'm trying to get it together here. That's some on video problems. Can you set this up?
Here we are, enjoying a little silence together. Beautiful. All right, well, maybe we'll just, we'll just trust, and it might just be you and me, Dr. Clark, but we'll see what happens.
Sounds good. We'll make it work.
Right. So welcome back, everybody. This is it's actually a panel discussion about creative solutions to healthcare accessibility. So we know for sure that we have Dr. Frank Clark with us. He is a board certified adult psychiatrist at Prisma Health Upstate in South Carolina. In addition to his psychiatric practice, Dr. Clark has held many leadership positions in national organizations like the AMA and the American Psychiatric Association. Locally, he serves on the board of directors for National Alliance on Mental Illness, Greenville, and Mental Health of America, Greenville. He was recently appointed to serve as the president of the board of directors for Mental Health of America. Dr. Clark has presented on various topics related to health equity, the interplay between faith communities and mental health, workforce diversity, microaggressions, and the social determinants of mental health. We are hopeful that we will also be joined by Reverend Cynthia Carter Perilliat. She is a co-founder and executive director of the Alameda County Care Alliance Collaborative, which is a faith-based community program in partnership with local, clinical, academic, and community organizations, engaging with 25 faith-based organizations and their pastors in Alameda and Contra Costa counties in Northern California. She is the creator of I Choose to Prepare, which is a dramatic and creative approach to advanced care planning, soliciting youth involvement through spoken word, dance, and visual arts. Reverend Cynthia has over 25 years experience as a hospice and palliative care educator, trainer, and marketing professional, as well as being a gospel recording artist under her Splendor record label. We're hopeful also to be joined by Amika Tree Tendaji, who is a co-founder of an organization called Ujimaa Medics, a Chicago-based organization that provides emergency first response training to community members to help address the lack of community health services in that area. So here we are. I think what we'll do is work our way through our guests and give you each about 15 minutes to share with us about your work and how it relates to creative solutions to healthcare accessibility, or how we can illuminate some of the challenges to healthcare accessibility. And then we'll have a Q&A with everybody and see what questions come up. So Dr. Clark, I'm going to give you the floor first.
Thank you, Cal, and good afternoon to everyone. Thank you for being here, and I look forward to fellowshipping with all of you, and honored to be joined by our esteemed panelists, our Reverend Cynthia Carter Perilliat. I figured that we could kind of set the stage today, and this is an important topic, and so I'm glad that we're addressing this in terms of healthcare accessibility and how do we move the needle, so to speak, so that we can allow our communities to thrive. I'm going to focus on the community that is very important to me. It's because of my Warren identity, and that is the Black community, to kind of set the stage in terms of healthcare and accessibility. Obviously, there is more than just the Black community that makes up our country. However, I think that we can learn a lot of things from the trials and tribulations that my community has gone through for centuries and can apply them to other communities that have been marginalized and oppressed. So with that, I appreciate the introduction by Cal. Some of the things that I have found throughout my years as a psychiatrist is that you have to meet people where they are, and you have to go above and beyond the bedside. I think as a physician, so often we are in our silos, so to speak. We see patients, for example, I have seen patients on the inpatient unit in our psychiatric hospital here in Greenville, South Carolina, and I've also seen patients in the ambulatory setting or outpatient clinic. And I find that part of being a physician is not just to disseminate information and have the knowledge base to help my patients thrive in those settings. I also feel it is the obligation and responsibility of the healthcare provider or the healer, so to speak, to go out into the community. There's a quote that I want to share with you by Cornel West, and I really think it is poignant in so many ways, given all of the things that we are seeing in our world today, especially as it relates to social injustice and healthcare disparities. So Cornel writes, "You can't lead the people if you don't love the people. You can't save the people if you don't serve the people." So I would like us to reflect on that that statement by Cornel, because again, I think it is very poignant and timely. Some of the things that I think about when I read that statement by Cornel West, again, are the disparities that we see, the lack of affordability when it comes to healthcare, the myth that meritocracy is the reason why we have healthcare disparities. We often are neglecting what I call the nuts and bolts of healthcare disparities, which are the social determinants of health. Basically, those conditions where we live, we grow, we age, which are determined by the resources that are available for communities. In terms of wealth and education and those resources. And what we find is that there is an unequal distribution of resources depending on what your zip code is. I'm from Chicago originally, and as a Black man, I have the shortest life expectancy compared to my white brothers and sisters and other groups. And it's not because of the melanin in my skin. A lot of times when we're looking at healthcare accessibility, we tend to blame the individual or the community for the choices that we have made, so to speak, that meritocracy concept. And, even as successful as I've been going up the social ladder and education and things, I still have the shortest life expectancy. And I live in a pretty decent zip code here in South Carolina. And I lived in a zip code here that I would say was middle class. And then when I was in medical school, the life expectancy where I went to medical school downtown was definitely greater than where I grew up on the south side of Chicago. So I think when we're talking about creative solutions and looking at healthcare accessibility, we have to be mindful that it is not the community or the individual that makes up that community's fault for where we are in our life as it relates to our health. So how do we move that needle again? How do we what solutions are in place that we can do to help increase healthcare accessibility for marginalized communities, or communities that feel powerless, or communities that feel exploited, communities where they're, where we're known as the other, or othering, so to speak, because some communities feel like we will be a threat to their existence in terms of their prosperity. I think we have to break down the silos, and we have to reach across the aisle, and we definitely have to be innovative. I want to share with you some things that I have found to be helpful in my practice and in the community. So I serve a community in Greenville, South Carolina, that I would say is predominantly made up of Black people and white people. Smaller populations of Latinx and our Asian brothers and sisters, and indigenous brothers and sisters, but mainly the landscape in terms of race and ethnicity, I would say African American and Caucasian. Through my work in the community, whether it be through NAMI or Mental Health of America, organizations that are dedicated to advocacy and education, and making sure that the information that we have is being disseminated to the community, we've been able to do a lot of partnerships, and I'm very blessed and honored to be a part of those organizations. Some of my work has also been involved with collaborating with faith-based organizations. So I am a man of faith, and I attend, my family and I attend Fourth Presbyterian Church here in Greenville, South Carolina. And I want to share with you some of the things that we've been doing at our church, because I think it definitely relates to the solutions that we're talking about as it relates to healthcare accessibility. So I'm part of what we call Table for Faith, Justice, and Mercy group here at our church. And that's based off of Micah 6:8, when it says, to love kindly, to do just, and I'm paraphrasing, so excuse me right now, but basically to make sure that we are being just in our country, that we are loving with kindness and humility. And so with that group at our church, we have had sessions that talk about the intersectionality between health and faith. And oftentimes, especially I will say in my community, sometimes we may not want to go to the doctor's office. Some of that stems from, unfortunately, years of mistrust in the system. That mistrust is valid. You can see that right now with our COVID pandemic, and the fear of that these vaccinations may cause harm. That doesn't mean that everybody in our community feels that way. However, when you talk to our grandparents and great-grandparents and people who have been around for a long time, the Tuskegee experiment is a very good example, or the Sims experiment, or the Henrietta Lacks experiment. All these things kind of come back full circle. And so what I have found is that being at the center of what I would say the sanctuary, so to speak, for the Black community, which is the church, is a way to help create solutions as we talk about healthcare accessibility. So I've been a part of my faith community, and leading talks along with my wife, who is a doctor as well, a doctor of nursing in psychiatry. And we have talked to our congregation about what is mental health and what it isn't, kind of dispelling those myths. And I think that is a way to be creative. Again, it's a sanctuary, and not only are we having church, but we're also communing. That communion is so important when we're talking about healthcare accessibility, because if individuals are not going to go to the emergency department or to the hospital or to the ambulatory clinic, we want to make sure that they are getting the information from the so-called experts and not getting misinformation from the media or things that they were reading. The other thing that I think about is in terms of healthcare accessibility is it involves the arts and the humanities. So I have a background in music and dance. I grew up doing tap, ballet, and jazz, and played the piano and saxophone throughout college. And I write a lot of poetry. And I feel like the arts provide a cathartic antidote for communities to heal. Not only can you you can feel a lot of things in art, you can see a lot of things, but you can also hear the narratives of individuals through the arts and humanities. What I have found to be beneficial in my practice is reaching out across the aisle and collaborating with different artists, different composers, even in film. I have had the opportunity to be a consultant on 2 short films, one that premiered at the Tribeca Film Festival and was recently on BET and CBS, and the other film that is available on HBO. And these 2 films highlight Black excellence, but they also highlight mental health in the Black community as it relates to what happens when you have a family that is exposed to community violence. What happens when you lose a loved one and the grieving process. Now, that's another way to bring in the community to say, okay, this is how, you know, we can be educated and increase our knowledge and understanding of why mental health is so important. As our former Surgeon General, Dr. David Satcher, you know, talked about, mental health, without mental health, there is no health. And so I want to encourage us to think outside the box, you know, cultivating your interest, reaching across the aisle and making sure that we collaborate with people in different disciplines. We don't have to operate in silos. I feel like when we do that, that's when we miss the boat and we're not allowing communities to thrive and prosper. There's no reason why I should continue to have the shortest life expectancy. I'm 40 years old. The fact that I have made it this far is a blessing in a lot of ways, and I hope to live another 40 or more 50 years. However, I'm supposed to be here on this earth until I've been called home by my Creator. But we cannot continue to thrive as a community. Social justice, defined by the American philosopher John Rawls, he defines it as the assurance of protection of equal access to liberties, rights, and opportunities. And then he adds another part of that, taking care of the least advantaged members of society. I think we could all agree that social justice is important, but we are seeing more social injustice than we are social justice. So when social injustice is percolating, so to speak, there is no social justice. There is no longevity. There is no optimal health. There is no economic growth, rising to the social mobility, economic mobility, whatever terms you want to use. And so we as communities, whether it be our faith-based communities, our YMCAs, the arts communities, we all have to come together. The other community that I think is sometimes we forget about are barbershops and hair salons. Another thing that is especially important in the Black community. I know when I go to the barbershop, we're going to be talking about a couple things: sports and music. But we could also create that space to disseminate information about mental health, especially for our young Black men who often we don't want to talk about our feelings. A lot of times, you know, we are taught to this internalize things, but we need to be able to share how we're feeling and be vulnerable and transparent. But we can't do that if we don't have a safe space. And so again, where are those safe spaces? That may be different for everyone here on this call. My safe spaces, my sanctuaries, my church, my art space, the YMCA, NAMI, Mental Health of America. I want to encourage us all to find that space and then cultivate that space. Make that space a space of healing and knowledge. And then I think that opens up the opportunity to have more trust, to then go to your provider and say, this is what I've been hearing in my community by the experts. This is what how I would like to advocate for my care. And so I challenge us all to end oppression, and oppression comes in many forms: marginalization, powerlessness, violence, cultural imperialism, and exploitation. I challenge us all to be mindful of our implicit and explicit biases. I challenge us all to have cognitive flexibility to be willing to work together for all communities, that we can get rid of this othering and find what really brings us all together, and that is humanity. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Clark. Reverend Cynthia, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It's great to be with all of you. It is a joy and a wonderful experience to be a part of this Hillwell conference. Before I get started, just thank you to the executive director and Rebecca and team, and certainly Dr. Clark. Thank you for participating in this panel as well. And my apologies, it has been a challenge a bit to have technology work with me today, but the good news is we are here and I am grateful. So I think a good way for me to continue to add into this conversation is to talk a little bit about the organization that I've been tremendously fortunate to co-found. It's called the Alameda County Care Alliance. It is a collaborative of faith-based organizations. It's a collaborative of community organizations. But the real emphasis of our work as it relates to partnering with health system really comes to how do we support people that have advanced illness in our communities, people that are dealing with end-of-life issues, people that are dealing with serious chronic illnesses, and many times often left out of the equation, as many of us know, are caregivers. And so it was a very personal experience that I experienced with our dad, our father, when he was diagnosed at his first visit to the doctor's office to have a metastasized cancer. Looking well, doing well, just had some symptoms that were very concerning. And so as a result of our experience and our holistic approach to health and our holistic approach to life, when Dad was diagnosed with an 8 months to live prognosis, of course, for us, our faith and who we are as holistic minded people, meaning mind, body, and spirit, as just really foundational for us, was really the time for us to activate that which we believed. In our community, we call it practice what you preach. And so it was a time for us really to practice our meditative practices, our prayer life. We are of a Christian faith, so we believe in God, the Father, and the Trinity, the Son, Jesus, and the Holy Spirit. So it was really important for us to tap into what we've been raised to believe and which we also knew experientially. So my story is a good news story in that Dad was diagnosed with metastasized cancer, 8 months to live, but actually lived 8 years with that metastasized cancer. And what they did for me, what I didn't tell you is my undergrad is in marketing, business marketing. And I saw an opportunity that I thought was really important, being in experientially the space where I saw white health systems, if you will, predominantly white health systems that really didn't quite jive with this notion of these African Americans. I'm one of 5, and so we would come, mom, dad, of course, may have been in the hospital at a certain period of time, my siblings, their spouses, even some of the grandkids, and we would gather around dad in the bed and pray and sing and tap into our rich resource of faith. And it was really interesting. It wasn't always what you'd hope in terms of response from those health systems. But what I did see was that there was an opportunity to, first and foremost, have people to be proud of who they are. If there ever was a time, particularly as we look at what's happening in this country, to really have a sense of ownership of who you are, whether you're German or Jewish or African American or Latinx, whatever is important to you as a holistic individual, now is the time more than ever to embrace that. And so that's what we did. And so the opportunity that I saw was really to help the faith-based community to kind of shore up, if you will. So the reality is that when you're given a negative prognosis, then what do you lean on? What do you draw from? And it varies for different people, but for us, it was our faith and a very holistic approach to health. And so I saw an opportunity and I connected with the pastor of my church, which at the time, Frank was Dr. and Pastor Bishop Arthur and Brazier, we were living in Chicago at that time. And it was Bishop Brazier and his deep wisdom as I shared, much as I would as a marketing person. I was in marketing with a major 500 corporation. I prepared my own presentation as a volunteer. This was a month after my dad passed away in that 8-year period. And I wanted the faith community to see, and this was an predominantly African-American church, 15,000 members at the time. I think there may be more at Apostolic now, Frank, I don't know. But Dr. Brazier, his son, is still a mighty leader there in Chicago. And the reality is that as Bishop Brazier embraced what it is that I shared as a personal story, but also shared the benefits and tried to, how should we say, address the myths and misconceptions around palliative care, around hospice care, around embracing a holistic approach to health as a whole, that literally something very powerful began to happen. So the support of leadership was amazing. And we then seized on the opportunity to understand who are the medical leaders in this congregation. Well, as you can imagine, 15,000 plus members, you've got not only physicians, and you've got nurses, and you've got, oh my goodness, home health aides, you've got social workers, you've got every spectrum from a professional perspective that are embedded within faith communities. And they recognizing the needs, the deep needs, when people are discharged from hospital settings, particularly low income and underserved communities. There is a huge gap in terms of getting the resources that they need. And so what we did through that partnership was literally began to build, at that time, palliative care and hospice ministries within churches, within Chicago. I moved to California and had the opportunity to kind of start that work, if you will, in Northern California. So I have to tell you that I am a very strong proponent in any community of a holistic approach to life, a holistic approach to health, an embracing of who you are and your culture, whatever that looks like, however that's represented. And certainly in communities of Black and Brown, where we know we have tremendous health disparities. I have some slides that I had prepared, but technology is challenging me today. So I'm going to just speak to some of those things that are in my slide deck. And maybe Rebecca, Cal, later, feel free to make those available to your observing community and your audience. I'm happy to share those at another point. But basically, these slides speak to the fact that African-American communities do experience a disproportionate burden when it comes to advanced illness and end-of-life issues. And what we see is this lack of access to care, quality care, lack of access to resources. But also we know that there's a lot of documented evidence when we think about literally having this notion that you are accepted and you are embraced within health systems and communities. And so this model of care that we've co-founded is one where people can have the opportunity to have the sense that they are being not only seen, but also heard. And so what we've done is train lay people. So you don't have to be a medical person. We do have people on our team that have medical backgrounds, but it's not a prerequisite, certainly. But the idea is we can train caring, compassionate, keyword, trusted individuals that reflect the community to participate as what we call community care navigators. And then those individuals are thoroughly trained. We have biweekly trainings that really also engage our navigators in the curriculum that we've developed. We have tools that have been specially developed and designed so that people that are part of our program, and it is a free program, that are dealing with serious chronic illnesses, advanced illness, and end of life, as well as their caregivers, then have the opportunity to be partnered with a care navigator that goes through a process of assessing their needs and understanding their needs from a holistic perspective. And so again, it goes back to that holistic approach that is so foundationally, I think, important for any individual. And that reflects whatever that means to them. Again, spirituality varies depending on who you talk to. But certainly we get to the heart of what are the values of the individual, what's important to them, and then let that lead the way. So what happens is through this initial assessment with our care team supervisor, who is a registered nurse, we're a non-medical model, with that care navigator assessing from a holistic perspective what's important to that participant, then we're able to develop a personalized program for each individual. And therefore, those individuals get their priorities met, and then we're able to not only partner with health systems to help address those needs, but also with community and connecting them with resources and supports. And so in this COVID period, of course, I'll speak to pre-COVID. Pre-COVID, most of our visits were in person. In this COVID period, most of our visits, actually all of our visits right now, are virtually by phone. As you can imagine, a lot of our participants are seniors. And so not necessarily having access to technology. But the reality is that we're finding completion of advanced directives, as an example, some 55% completion, even in this space of COVID. People are really interested in being empowered. And we use that kind of language because we want them to know this is about what you want. But certainly our navigators have the time and the opportunity to really hear what the participants are saying and help prepare them for their visits with their clinicians. And so they're feeling much more empowered to be able to have their needs heard and then their needs met. So I think that's probably a good place to put a pause. But I simply wanted to have the opportunity to share how important it is. We talk about healing well, when we talk about advancing in life from a personal perspective, I think it's so very important. And I think Dr. Clark, you seem to have that similar perspective, just that holistic approach to humanity. Gosh, couldn't we use more of that in this country? So I'll stop there. I'm sure, Cal, you may have some questions for us, or I'll pass the baton to you.
Definitely. There a bunch of questions have come in, and I've been scribbling furiously my own questions in case others didn't come in. But yeah, I mean, thank you both for that perspective. And so many things come up about, that what we're really doing is creating something different. And that is a huge challenge. So the first question that came in was actually, so with all due respect to Dr. Clark, the lowest life expectancy in any state and globally is that of Black transgendered women, which is about 35 years of age. My question is, while the Black community is connected via the church in many regards, churches have also extended loads of violence and pushed beliefs that cause literal harm to many people in the LGBTQIA+ community, especially trans and gender expansive folks. What ways can churches be more inclusive to the trans community?
That's a great, excuse me, that's a great question. And my apologies. The data that I was looking at was did not separate with trans individuals. I am aware that Black trans individuals and gender expansive individuals are definitely marginalized. The question kind of also comes into that intersectionality that I think is hugely important. So my apologies, and thank you for sharing that data with me, because I will excuse me, carry that data forth in other presentations. So I appreciate that. In terms of the question, how can churches be more inclusive? Is that? Okay.
Yeah.
So this question has been brought up, I think, for a long time. And I think churches need to kind of, for lack of a better word, look in their own eyes and think about how they are spreading the love of Christ, so to speak, since we're talking about churches. I don't think that you can say that you're a person of faith and then not love everyone. I would say, I think people need to do their homework and be very inclusive. It's one thing to say that you are inviting people to the table, so to speak, but then you don't want to hear that person's perspective and their lived experience. I think that is a detriment to communities. And yes, the church has definitely played a role in a lot of ways of marginalizing people that I care for. I can give you some countless examples of patients that, not just Black patients, patients of all different races and ethnicities, but I have heard patients tell me, I used to have faith, but I don't anymore because my church is not accepting of who I love, for example. And I'm no pastor, so I'm not going to pretend that I am one, although I am the son of a preacher man. But I think it is important to work with faith communities to provide. I don't believe in being the prosecutor, so to speak, or the preacher in that sense of like, well, we need to do this. I do think it is important to have an open dialogue, which I think is lacking in our country in general. A lot of times people just don't want to sit down with someone who may look differently than them or who may have a different sexual identity or whatever. They don't want to talk and actually hear that person's perspective. I think the church could benefit from that as well. Again, if you are saying that we welcome everybody, then you have to practice what you preach and kind of walk that walk and talk that talk. So I think it starts with open dialogue. Some churches are not willing to have that dialogue. And I would say if that church is not willing, or that faith home is not willing to have that dialogue, to me, that says then maybe that's not a faith community that you want to be a part of, and that's okay. The good thing is there are many faith communities out there that are welcoming and affirming, and I think you have to look at what's going to be best for your overall health.
Reverend Cynthia, anything to add?
Oh, I would absolutely ditto those comments. I think when I talked about culture and embracing a holistic approach to health, I mean, the reality is that is the absolutely only way to go. And that is embracing people and their sexuality and who they are themselves. And health should be driven by that definition, not what a system thinks that people need. And again, it goes back to my comment earlier. It's like, couldn't we embrace that as a nation? I mean, wouldn't that be a message for us to try to resonate? And I think healthcare and the work of healthcare and the activities of healthcare and the activities of the faith community. I mean, what better places to really begin to build true platforms that embrace people from a holistic perspective. And so I agree with you, Frank. If people can't embrace me in terms of who I am as a person, then what I need to do is march in another direction and find people that will align with me. And that's how it's worked for us as African Americans. That's how it's worked for the LGBTQ community and other communities. Whoever you are, you align with people that can embrace you for who you are. That's it. That's all, folks. And those that can't embrace you, keep marching, keep stepping. Because I'm thinking of the song that I heard many years ago, "What the world needs now is love." It's like, where is the love? It's embracing people for who they are. So it's all about that being our central truth.
Yeah, there's so much engagement to be had. And I think that we, as we get better at talking about these things, we have to keep, it seems like one of the failings of some of the past movements, like I'm thinking about suffrage and how white women said to Black women, like, let us in first and then we'll fight for you. And we have to stop creating a hierarchy of like, well, it'll be easier if we get these people in first, and then don't worry, we'll come back and get you. And I think that as we start to talk more about the endemic racism, and that we look at more kids are being gender fluid and all of these, like, this is all just, I think it was Chase Anderson this morning was talking about all of the categories where people had felt discrimination. And basically what we could say is where people don't feel discrimination is white, male, able-bodied, straight, thin. Everybody else is experiencing some kind of marginalization. And so everything we do can work in that direction, but it definitely puts those of us who, I guess, can speak or have direct experience with that in a position of having to decide, do I raise my voice here, and do I risk vicarious traumatization or re-traumatization by educating people who I'm not even on their radar and they're actively harming me? Who wants to be in that space? And I think it's a hard decision to make, but there are communities that just they're not against insert whoever, it's just not on their radar. And so who's going to put their toe in and say, so, hey, you forgot about us,
Right.
and know that there's going to be blowback sometimes.
Absolutely.
We have a question about, and then I feel like the question was written very simply, but I feel like it's actually a very complicated situation. So I know in massage therapy, we have, through decades of well-meaning volunteerism, sort of undersold ourselves as part of the healthcare picture. And we want to get involved in movements and activities like what you've both been talking about. And typically that means volunteerism. And so I guess I want to acknowledge that while we work to kind of dismantle capitalism, we are also working within it. And the question was, how can we as massage therapists create a safe community for those who could benefit from healing touch, but who don't have access because of cost, privilege, et cetera? How can we work within our communities to do this work? And I guess my extra question is, without working for free. And where others are working for free, that's sort of our code at HealWell. Like if everybody at this event or in this program is volunteering, that's a different thing than if everybody else is getting paid and we're being asked to come in for free. But how do we, as any kind of provider, I mean, certainly as massage therapists, but what have you seen and what are your thoughts about that?
It's a tough question, as I was thinking, but I think I would say that finding those opportunities to get involved. So I'm a big proponent of massage therapy. I get my massages every 2 to 3 weeks, so because it keeps me well. Um, but I wonder if there are, and I don't know this, but I wonder if there are projects or grants that are available for, again, I'm kind of looking at this intersectionality because the Reverend talked about in her organization how you have social services, allied health professionals. I wonder if there's an opportunity where you don't really have to reinvent the wheel, but you can kind of get in on some projects or partner with other people that are doing this work, because I think massage is very important. We all know the healing that touch can have on people, and especially all of us have all had stress in our lives, and whether it be adverse childhood experiences or vicarious trauma through what we're seeing. And so I wonder if there is a niche, so to speak, or an avenue that your discipline could intersect, so to speak. I would say maybe even find a grant to apply for and do it with someone in these different organizations. Health systems are always looking for, I mean, like I talked about the collaborations that I'm doing with artists and composers. I think it's really kind of looking at who's doing some of this work and seeing if you can find a way to enhance, so to speak, that the work that is being done, and going from that way. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, I mean, I think I would add to that what we often do is we'll apply for a grant, and when the grant runs out, the program's over. And so I think part of it is in our approach to, I want to do this in an ongoing way. What can we measure? What things aren't being properly addressed that we think bodywork might be able to address? And how do we collect that data so that at the end of this $3,000, $5,000, we can say, this is what we did. This is how it mattered. And then we can either find more funding or find donors to continue to support that, or actually build it into healthcare.
Go ahead, Frank.
Yeah,
You want to comment?
as I was thinking too, there's so I have a friend that is an architect, excuse me, and known him for many years. He is very into what we call healing spaces, and he's been doing a lot of work. His name is Paul Alt, ALT, and he can find him on LinkedIn or just Google him. And he's been doing a lot of work with the VA and healing spaces for veterans. But basically, he feels, and I would agree with him, that these healing spaces are going to revolutionize the field of mental health as we know it. But as you were talking, I wonder if that would be a way for, adding, again, enhancing what people are doing, like who are in architecture or other disciplines. That may be a way to kind of go down to add to that healing space, so to speak.
Yeah, this is a great conversation. And also being such a strong proponent of massage therapy. And I'm also one that, twice a month I'm in there, man. I have this most incredible therapist. Literally, when he moved, oh gosh, 25 miles away, and I followed him. There's nothing you can say that really speaks to just the power of the touch and a tactician that really is gifted as a massage therapist. So much respect and kudos. I totally agree with this notion of, first of all, it takes a lot of personal passion. Um, and so as an organization, Cal, I salute you all for what you're doing. And I encourage you to continue to build these relationships with individuals and organizations that have like passion, that align with what it is that's super important for you all. I think that's tremendously important. I would say, and I totally agree with you, because our care navigators, these are not volunteer roles, these are paid positions. And frankly, I was very adamant about that if we're going to make an impact where people can have their voices heard and get their needs met, right, that we need to honor the fact that we need more hands on deck. We need more people that can establish this trusted relationship with individuals. I mean, massage therapists, I mean, you are exposing who you are, and just a totally complete way is the reality of it. I mean, how much more can you say about trust there, right? I mean, come on, people. So I think partnering with organizations that understand and value the importance of trust and the importance of the power of touch and the importance of self-care and the value that all of that brings to individuals in terms of their continued healing process. Partnering with those kinds of organizations and individuals is just so very important. But I have to also say that it does take a lot of sacrifice. It takes a lot of personal sacrifice to follow your passion and your dream. And I just believe that when we're aligned with our personal mission, right? I believe in personal mission statements, not just organizational mission statements, but it takes that kind of deep dedication and commitment to pursue these kinds of relationships where this holistic approach to health is embraced. Then differences can be made and change can be made in our culture in a positive way. How much, Cal, do you and your team really get testimonials from people? I mean, there are people that will stand and raise a flag and scream and yell about how important it is, the work that you do, documenting that. So yes, the data is important. Testimonials, and from my perspective and experiences, aligned up. It may not be quantitative, right? But it certainly is qualitative. And so I just suggest just bringing all of that to the table and march, man. I mean, go after it with all the passion that you bring to the work that you do.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point about what is data, because we do tend to go straight to quantitative. And I think that healthcare is actually starting to shift toward the experience of illness, the experience of wholeness. And, we're working on a study right now with patients who are receiving left ventricular assistive devices to see if massage therapy can improve their self-efficacy, which is just their sense of being able to cope with their life. And that's real hard to measure, except by direct report. So I think we have to keep asking those questions that feel hard to measure, but that really are important, and to be able to trace, does this keep this person out of the emergency department? Does this allow this person to not experience breakthrough pain? What are the things that we can look at that the qualitative information leads us back to those points? Because we still live in a world where the bean counters want to see the numbers, but when you have, like you said, patients who are passionate and people in the community saying, this is what happened, and this is the only thing that got added that I wasn't already getting, and it's made such a huge difference across the board that it's actually augmented all of the other type of care that I'm getting. And hats off to you, Reverend Cynthia, because one of our staff members just reminded me that your organization has collected data from the beginning. And that is a thing that people think, well, once we get going, we'll worry about putting that in place. And if you want to keep going, you have to start measuring right away. And you have to talk with the community. Like, I come in with my idea about what might be important to measure, but if you don't ask the community, the facility, where are your struggles? Where would it be worth measuring our impact? And where do you think we can intervene in problems that have seemed intractable? I feel like that's really, we're taught that to get a proposal funded, you have to show up with all the answers. And I feel like we really have to shift the paradigm to, I see a problem and I bet I don't see all the problems. Here's what I can bring. Where do you see what I can bring fitting into your understanding of these really multi-layered intersectional problems?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
So one of the things that, as you were both speaking, that came up was the idea that of how hard it is to access healthcare, and that there has been more of a move. We're working with a group in Arizona who's kind of, they're calling it a no wrong door model. And that, we really have to empower churches and YMCAs and other community organizations to be places where non-medical staff know enough about how to be a bridge when there needs to be contact with medical professionals. And I love the idea that your program, Reverend Cynthia, is a non-medical model, because we do so much at Healwell about 90% of good healthcare is communication. It's listening, it's understanding. Like, if you can't connect people with the right resources because you're not paying attention, it doesn't matter. So it's totally reasonable that community-based folks who don't have a medical background can really help us solve the staffing shortage and the overall inability for people to get in the door when they need to get in the door. So how do we do that? How do we, what have you seen in terms of who comes to your organizations or to your practices to say, like, I want to be a part of this? And how hard is it to train lay people to be effective in this capacity?
Yeah, another great question. I think it's important, again, I can't say enough about personal passion and dedication to what you really believe. For me, this is my life's work. And it took a certain scenario where I could bring my talents to the table. And that was a personal experience, right? I talked about my dad and our family. And that really gave me the marching orders. Why don't I bring my skills in marketing and training and education to this space, right? So I think there's something to be said about being, just dogged and determined, man. You got to believe that what you believe has great validity and really can impact and make a difference. So I can't underscore enough just the importance of that personal passion. And with that personal passion, we went to the systems. We go to the systems. We identify. So who are our people? Like, who believes? Who's socially justice minded in communities? Who has a track record? And we make that kind of determination and that kind of selective process, if you will, even in the faith community. As we were saying earlier, if you are not embracing me as a whole person, then next somebody will, right? And so that's still the approach and the mindset that we have when it comes to community organizations, health system partners, faith community partners. And so I would encourage, believe that what you are proposing and what you do does make a difference. It makes a difference. Then go after the folks that have like minds, identify them, find them. You do it. We never wait for anybody to come to us, ever. We look and we always are seeking out where the partners, where the people. So thank you, Cal and team. We love y'all. We're looking forward to continuing, growing our relationships. You all found us, but you know what? That's just becoming, I think, more apparent because we're putting ourselves in national conferences and audiences and palliative care and hospice care and health and wholeness scenarios. Once you put yourself out there, then people have the opportunity to learn more about what you do. But we don't wait on it. We go after it. That's one of my, just what I really believe in terms of marketing. You got to wear that marketing hat and you got to get out there and make people aware of who you are and what you believe. You'd be surprised. Yeah. People are waiting for what you all have to offer. Even more.
Dr. Clark, anything to add to that?
I would echo what's been said. I as I was hearing Reverend Cynthia talk, this power of the narrative is so important. And I have the opportunity and blessing. I've had the opportunity and blessing throughout my career to work with learners from different clinical environments, so to speak, medical students and residents, nursing students, pharmacy students, marriage and family students. And one of the things that I always try to encourage them is that who you are providing care for is more important than establishing the diagnosis. And when I think about this whole, I too am a huge proponent of a holistic approach to care. That doesn't mean that I'm against treatment for depression or anxiety or schizophrenia or bipolar disorder with medications, because medications can be effective. But I'm also a realist and know that medications are not going to solve a relationship conflict. Medications are not going to solve conflict at the job. Um, and so, when I'm talking to my patients, I look at it as, I look at their treatment plan as a puzzle, and there is multiple pieces to the puzzle. That can be their faith, that can be meditation, that can be yoga, massage therapy, right? What would it look like in healthcare systems if the if the treatment team included massage therapy? Just to think about that for a second. What would that look like? Right? That's innovative. That's thinking outside the box. But it all comes down to what people want to put their money towards in terms of healthcare systems. You talked about data. Yeah, everybody loves the numbers. And yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. I like to practice evidence-based medicine, and numbers are important, but narratives are also equally, as far as I'm concerned, important as well. And if we would stop to listen to the narratives of what is working for our communities, we might get a little bit further. One of my friends that's in the audience, Dr. Ann Blair Kennedy, who I work with. Hey, Ann, love Ann, she's awesome. She does this thing at the School of Medicine with the Patient Engagement Studio, where you actually, students and get to hear the lived experience of people living with different conditions. How powerful is that? There's other organizations that we have at our health system. There's the Apostles program that is geared towards making sure that individuals in the Latinx community are receiving optimal care, and they do community-based trainings there, and you have people who are non-clinical. Excuse me, which I think is important because it also, I think, creates a more of a safe space. Oftentimes, let's face it, when people come to see me, it's like, oh, I'm going to see for I hate this term, but I'm going to see my shrink. People get really scared. It's like, oh my God, I'm going to see a psychiatrist. I don't wear a white coat. Because I think that intimidates people. I don't need to wear a white coat to provide service for you. I actually wear a lot of fedoras, which throws a lot of my patients off, but it's a good conversation starter. And I think it eases them in and makes them feel comfortable. So I think we need to be doing more of that, kind of what Cal, what she has been speaking to, and what Reverend Cynthia is speaking to as well.
I want to throw a little bit of a curve to you guys, because what I'm seeing is sort of the white woke wave like coming your way, right? And how do I feel like one of the gaps that Heal Well can fill is to pause all these well-meaning white people and have them come through this way station where we say, like, so let's look inside you so that you don't show up with sort of pity and all the things that just perpetuate the systems that have led us to this place. And what do you see in terms of sort of white saviorism in your own communities? What I feel like I'm glad that more people are becoming active and getting involved. But there's a real like, yeah, boy, those people are terrible, but me, I want to get involved. And so I'm not going to perpetrate more harm. And so it's kind of a diffuse question, but it feels like a very big problem that I feel I want to get ahead of, because I think we have some real energy behind wanting to be a part of the solution. but so many of us don't know how much we're a part of the problem, and we bring that into our efforts of volunteerism and community engagement.
What a question. I'm gonna grab that, and Cal, I'll give you credit for it. The white woke wave. That's pretty good. You know, it's interesting because I have to be honest with you. While it's sometimes disturbing that it takes our white counterparts a long time, sometimes for many of us it's exasperating to help people to understand or simply hear, listen, be in the space with people that may not always identify with your background or your culture. I am of the opinion that time, opportunity, life's experiences ultimately will challenge us all. I don't think you can leave this earth without being challenged in a way that stirs truly your very foundation. I think it's just a matter of time. And I think we're seeing a lot of that challenge happening years prior, but certainly in the space that we're on now. If we think about what COVID is doing, it is bringing about certain kinds of separation across this country. In the faith community, people are being separated. In various cultures, people are being separated, whether you're vaccinated or not, or if you believe in that this is a hoax or not. I mean, various issues are causing people to separate. And the reality is, again, it goes back to life and its challenges. We're all going to be questioned and shaken, if you will. There's a scripture that says, if you allow me, that everything that can be shaken will be shaken, and only that which cannot be shaken will remain. I really believe that. I believe there is some kind of challenge that will come to each of us in our lifetimes that will cause us to really recognize what is our foundation and what is really real. So I'm not bothered by honestly, I do get exasperated, but in the long run, I really believe that humanity, I'm such an optimist. I'm always of the opinion that humanity will stand. And the perspective being that if you are a believer in the wholeness of individuals and love and those wonderful approaches to life that says, give people a chance, then those woke white folks, those do-gooders, thank God for them. Talk to your friends, multiply. Let's get the message out there, whatever it takes. I'm all about it because I think that ultimately life will challenge you and you'll have to make some choices. And it's the choices that we make ultimately will determine where we'll all land. Believe in climate change or not, keep living.
See what happens. Yeah.
See what happens. You're going to be shaken. I will be shaken. We're all. I just believe it. There will be a foundational shaking, and we'll have to come to the realization that we need each other, that we have more alike, right, and in common than we have dislikes and dissimilarities. And let's figure out how we can embrace one another and move in a direction that really speaks to love and wholeness for everybody.
Couldn't agree more. The woke nation, what have you. I love movements. If my white brothers and sisters want to be woke, that's great. If it moves, we talk about this concept of white privilege, which I know rubs some people the wrong way. We all have privileges in a lot of ways. Some of that is unearned, and I'm okay with privileges as long as you don't use them to manipulate people, and if you use them for good. So to Reverend Cynthia's point, everybody, we have to consult our conscience and our heart. And if your motivation behind being woke is to actually galvanize a movement that is going to spur love and promote wellness and promote equity and diversity and inclusion, I'm all for it. But if you have ulterior motives, that's something that you will have to answer to down the road. And when you look into the mirror, you you can lie to other people, but you can't lie to yourself. So I'm okay with it. I don't necessarily have a problem with it. I do think that to Reverend Cynthia's point that I'm an optimist most days of the week, although I do get exacerbated at times because I think probably my greatest frustration with not all, but some of my white brothers and sisters was that it took a modern day lynching of a Black man for people to become woke. I'll be honest, that was a little frustrating because there have been millions of George Floyd's and Breonna Taylor's and Ahmaud Arbery's. Now, one of the silver linings, I think, of COVID, and I know sometimes people give me this incredulous look when I say silver linings of COVID, but I actually think the silver lining of the pandemic was that we were all forced to slow down, or in Reverend Cynthia's point, shaken. We were all forced to slow down, and we got our minds shook a little bit because we actually had to turn on the TV because there wasn't much to do. You were social distancing or physical distancing. People were working remotely if they had to or needed to, or that was the only opportunity, but some people were furloughed. So what would you do? You might turn on Netflix, you might turn on the news, or you just spend time with family or do all the above. And it forced people to look at the news. And this didn't just happen in our country, this happened globally, that we saw the modern day lynching of a Black man yelling out for his mother. So as much as that frustrates me that it took that for us to finally, I guess, wake up, if that's what and I don't wish that upon any person. I don't, George Floyd should have never died to begin with. But we have to do more in this country, and I think we all need to wake up because we're very similar in so many ways, like Reverend Cynthia said. I do believe that if we would just focus on the similarities, doesn't mean that we can't embrace the differences, but so again, it goes back to this othering concept. People are so afraid of, oh, this group of people, they're going to be a threat to us. Well, a threat how? I got news for us. Naked we came into this world, and naked we shall depart. So we're all if we truly believe, whether you're spiritual or not, if we truly believe we're all created by the same person, how could we hate each other? Because there's, at the end of the day, there's more love than hate. I think there are a lot of people out here who have very good intentions, but some of them are just misinformed. And I think that's where it comes down to, where you sit down with people, save space, get rid of all the media, all the Facebooking and Twitter and things like that, and you actually have honest conversations. And I find it's when I've had those honest conversations with people who don't look like me, it's where we get somewhere. Now, they may not still agree with my perspective, and you don't have to agree with me. When the world is a beautiful place because we have diversity of thought and diversity of perspective. But the fact that we can't even talk about those topics that are important. Racism is important. Health equity is important. We have to start there. So woke nation, keep being woke, but make sure that you are consulting your conscience and your heart and have the right motives.
Yeah, y'all extend a lot more grace to white people than I'm able to most days. I'm exasperated by myself on a regular basis, and just how deeply held some of these beliefs and habits are. And I at the risk of being the skunk at the party, like, I just want to say to all the white people who feel relieved that 2 Black people just told you it's all good and just love, that's not enough. It's important. Do it. capital L, non-contractual, you don't owe me kind of love. And also there's some messed up stories in here that we got to look at and we have to stop telling. So we have to hold each other accountable. And I think from a place of compassion, one of the things that we do to each other for sure is well, I'm more woke than you. And, oh, nobody uses that word anymore. We use this word. That's not going to get us there. We are all here to support each other. And I think we do have to extend grace to each other and also keep showing up, because we're not woke. Like, our eyes are just starting to open and what we see is horrifying, but we have to keep opening them. And you don't sort of wake up and stay that way. And I think that's the other thing that we have to keep in mind, is that it is an everyday, every moment tending of this garden. And we need to ask for help. We need to be in community, and we need to know that, like, the destination is not visible. We talk all the time about, if you go from point A to point B, what's in between is not A. And we're going to be in not A for a real long time. And that is a really hard place to be. So just know that you're not alone in that feeling like there's no ground under your feet, but it's actually a sign that you're moving to a place that hasn't existed, and a really important place. So we have to help each other. Oh, we're getting some haiku wisdom in the chat from Dr. Clark. Courage to conquer and deliquesce division. I've never heard of that word. Shines humanity.
Means to melt away.
Oh, love it. It's almost onomatopoeic. Well, so we have a few more minutes. Are there other burning questions out there? I do want to share, somebody had suggested that when it comes to getting involved in the community, they couldn't even offer treatments at the free clinic because there wasn't a physical space for them. And so one of the things they do is offer self-treatment clinics and Q&A through the Parks and Rec department. But I think this is a really important place where, like Reverend Cynthia was saying, the passion and the creativity that results in collaboration, this is where we go to maybe the why, and we say, hey, like, do you have a room I could use where people from the free clinic could refer patients to me? I know that this is not the free clinic, but you have the space. And then people who are being treated at the free clinic who maybe never go to the Y, go to the Y. People who work at the Y see the people who go to the free clinic, and this relationship gets created. So I think part of it is really helping us all to see that serving the community looks lots of ways. And we can be creative, and we will need to be creative. The resources are available. They're just not. One of my therapists that I saw many years ago said, you can have anything you want as long as you're willing for it to look different than you thought it was going to look. And I feel like this is a classic example of that. We know what we want, but we look around and we go, oh, I don't know how to do this. That's okay. We can make up some cockamamie plans and try them out and see what happens. Because, like Reverend Cynthia said, people want what you're offering, and they want to be liberated and support each other in creating this different environment.
Absolutely. We need you.
Right. Any other burning questions out there before we let these lovely and epic humans go on their merry ways for a bit? I did want to tell you all, I am sad that Ujimaa Medics was not able to join us, but we actually had such a great conversation with them on the podcast a few weeks ago that they are a two-parter. So on August 21st and August 28th, we put out 2 episodes, both called Don't Think It's Not About You. We really went down in the weeds about why even organizations like Ujimaa Medics and these others have to exist, and what we can do as humans to shift that dynamic. So thank you both for being with us, and thank you all for being with us for the first day of this first ever HealWell virtual conference. Yes. We hope that you'll mosey back for the 6 p.m. Eastern mixer so we can chat it up and nerd out about all of the exciting things that were discussed today. Thank you.
Thank you for the wonderful opportunity. It was a pleasure.
Yes, thank you. Appreciate it.